On today's show, the Hawks and Magic are squaring off on Tuesday evening. We preview the festivities with myself and Philip from Locked On Magic. It's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1952 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Rowland, coming to you on a Monday evening here in mid-April, and I want to encourage you at the top of the show to make sure first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify. That also includes YouTube, so be sure to tell your friends about the podcast and subscribe, like, rate, review, all that fun stuff. Very much appreciate you being here as always. And today's show will be a crossover edition with myself and the host of Locked On Magic, talking about the game on Tuesday. Obviously, no frills here. The Hawks face the Magic in Orlando on Tuesday. Winner is the 7 seed. Loser has to play either Miami or Chicago on Friday. And that'll be interesting in itself. Obviously, a winnable game for the Hawks. They are underdogs coming into the game, according to our friends at FanDuel. There are no surprises on the injury front. Just want to note that. Trae Young is probable, as always, but I expect him to play, obviously, here. There was some questions. People were asking me about Larry Nance Jr. or Clint Capella. Those guys are still out at this point. No surprise upgrades there. And I want to plug the show as well from on Sunday. I did a post-game episode, a little bit of a preview in that spot as well, but also the stuff from Game 82, the final stuff from Trae's season, Dyson's season, etc. That's all still relevant for you right now on that podcast episode. And one more quick stat before I turn it over to Philip to kind of host this crossover edition. There have been 8 play-in tournaments so far in the recent history of the event, 4 in the East and 4 in the West. The 7 seed, which is Orlando, and the 10 seed have pretty definitive histories. The 7 seeds made the playoffs all 8 times. The 10 seed has missed the playoffs all 8 times. Now, that's going to change at some point. One of those or both of those are going to happen at some point soon, but they haven't happened yet, when at least I say it out loud. But the other thing is the 8 seed and the 9 seed have actually split. 50% of the time, the 8 seeds made it. 50% of the time, the 9 seeds made it. I still like the Hawks' chances more than 50% to make the playoffs with 2 chances to win, either in Orlando or at home against either Miami or Chicago on Friday. But nothing's assured here whatsoever. I think the Hawks are in good shape here. A winnable game, as I said before, on Tuesday in Orlando. But it's obviously put over shut-up time. If you're the Hawks, you have to play well in the next couple of games, preferably just win on Tuesday, and then you fast forward to Sunday in Boston. But in the meantime, that is the stakes, and the Hawks have a very, very important high-stakes game on Tuesday. All right, I'll get out of the way now. Here we go with myself and Philip talking all things Hawks and Magic.
And this is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, joined by my good friend. I like to think he's my good friend. Maybe not for the next 24 hours or so. Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks was happy to let me sit next to his empty chair yesterday in Atlanta. He probably was the winner in all of that at the end of the day. I did get to record Locked On Magic from the Hawks table after the game, which was cool for me. I don't know if anyone cared or noticed, but Brad, we are here. We previewed this last week. We're having this conversation again, but we're here. How are you feeling heading into this play-in game?
Yeah, I mean, third time in 8 days, even if the second matchup was entirely meaningless for all parties, that one almost doesn't count. Like, I was doing prep for this, looking at stats, and I'm like, oh yeah, this game, I could pretty much just eliminate this game and just go for the first 3. It's one of those where nothing mattered yesterday, but yeah, we're ready to go. It's not quite a win or go home. It's one of those games that's like a must win, but not a must win at the same time. There's urgency, but there's not go home urgency. So interesting for sure. And these teams are very familiar with each other, which I'm sure everybody will talk about.
Yeah, and it's interesting in that because we had a game of, maybe not similar magnitude, but a similar kind of not win or go home, but you get control over a lot of your future if you win this game. And we talked about this last week. So, if you want the kind of the season recap-y stuff, but in both in Locked On Magic and Locked On Hawks feed, you could go back to last Tuesday's episode where we previewed when the Magic played the Atlanta Hawks last week for control over the Southeast Division and the 7 seed. The Magic came out on top in that game. And I think that's kind of the place we have to start because I know I listened to your episode after that game just to kind of get a feel for what you were saying. And I think we both kind of came away with the same sort of takeaway that this was a playoff test. That the Magic passed and the Hawks didn't pass. So I think there's a lot that we can learn from that game last Tuesday. So let's start with you. What was the big takeaway from that Magic Hawks game at the Kia Center last week?
Yeah, for me, it was all the things that you were worried about as the Hawks going into that game were the reasons why you lost the game, which is kind of frustrating. It's like I previewed that game even before you and I talked, and I'm writing stuff about it, and it's like, all right, if they could do this, this, and this, they'll be in good shape, and they didn't do any of those things. And it's like, okay, on one hand, you understand why you lost the game if you didn't check those boxes, right? On the other hand, you did check those boxes, and it was pretty obvious. It wasn't like there was stuff that was super nuanced. Like, we all look at the same stats and all the same stuff. We're all watching the same teams. And if you can't check those boxes, and part of it's, physical limitation, the Hawks have some personnel challenges against Orlando that I'm sure we'll come back to. Just lack of physicality and size is going to be a big theme of this game. And I think that game, honestly, not necessarily for me, but it was all kind of baked in. I think the number one thing that I talked to people about that were like more neutral arbiters of the game, people around the league, was like, hey, just one team's a lot more physical than the other right now, a lot bigger than the other one right now, especially at the forward spots. And that's not news to Magic people, that it's a great thing to have two monster forwards that you could build your team around, right? And the Hawks have one of those guys who's just not playing right now, and they don't have another one, and they're a little bit undersized, and the Hawks tend to default to go small and juice their offense, which can work sometimes, but if it doesn't work, it looks like you're really, really, really small. So that was my broad takeaway. It was like the things that didn't happen, like fouling too much, Orlando gets to the line a lot, that happened in that game, 31 free throw attempts, the Hawks just being too small. And then look, if the Hawks are going to lose a shooting battle to the Magic, they're going to lose, almost certainly. Because that's the one area where the Hawks are definitely better than the Magic, right, is shooting. And the Magic won a shooting battle. And it's like, if that happens, the Hawks are not like totally dead, but they're probably in some trouble.
Yeah, and the final in that game, 119 to 112. It really, to me, it kind of felt like a little bit of the opposite in that sense, in that the Magic overcame some things that they can't do if they want to compete in these kinds of games. They gave up a ton of offensive rebounds. So like 14 offensive rebounds for 34 points. Onyeka Okongwu, they kind of just bet on, we're going to really force the ball out of Trae Young's hands and let Onyeka Okongwu kind of roam around a little bit. He made 4 threes in that game, and then started like attacking the paint a little bit more. So I actually want to kind of talk a little bit about his development, because I think he could be a huge swing factor in this game. And that's something the Magic kind of bet on. And I think they'll bet again, saying Onyeka Okongwu is not going to make 4 3-pointers in a game again. The Magic also missed 10 free throws in the game. They left a lot of points on the board. It almost, to me, and I'm curious what you think about this, it almost felt to me like, yeah, the Magic won by 7. They were up by 6 in the fourth quarter. Atlanta looked like they were making that last push. It almost felt like, to me, the Magic should have won this game by more. Like, it should have been a 15, 20-point game. And the Magic made not like huge mistakes, but they didn't like kind of put their foot on the pedal. It was just when they got challenged, especially in that fourth quarter, they made that run to take that 6-point lead with about 5 minutes to go back out to 12. They kind of got challenged, and then they kind of put their foot down at the end there to take full control over the game and win it. And it was a game where they were in control for most of it. Like, they had the lead. It was up around, they made that push, I think, toward the end of the second quarter to get it up to 10-11. And that's where it kind of stayed. They never fully ran away. They never let Atlanta back in the game. They just kind of felt like Orlando, to me, left some points on the board. They weren't perfect, and they still won the game and won it relatively comfortably.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure on my reaction, I said this, and if I didn't, I probably should have, but this was not as close to the game as the final score indicated. To your point, like, it was a 14-point game with like 75 seconds left. And the Hawks scored the last 7 points to make it look closer than it was. Now, it wasn't a blowout either, to your point. It was a 6-point game mid-fourth quarter. It was never out of control until probably, the 2-minute mark, 3-minute mark of the fourth quarter. Yeah. Like, it was still in somewhat of a doubt. But 7 was probably not indicative of the final score of what it probably could have been. Maybe if you average out the shooting, Orlando had one of their better shooting nights and the Hawks didn't. But you said already, like, the Hawks did some stuff that they don't always do. Like, they really, really dominated the offensive glass. I'm pretty sure that was their season high in second chance points in a game, which you wouldn't expect against this Magic team, given where the Hawks are. So, like, things happen. It's one basketball game. We'll talk about another one that's going to happen on Tuesday. But I think that is definitely fair. I don't know if Hawks fans would love to hear that, but like, on that particular night, Orlando was probably 10 points better than the Hawks in that game. And granted, the games in Orlando, all those things, but the games in Orlando again. So, like, it's, as we'll talk about later, the Hawks are going to be underdogs in this game once again for a reason. And that's probably should be, if you just watch the most recent game, you don't want to overweight one game, throw the one out Sunday completely again.
Sunday's game doesn't count.
The same exact matchup.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really convenient, actually. A lot of times you don't have a matchup like this. It's pretty much the same rosters, the same team, the same location 1 week later. And there were stakes in that game, which you led this podcast, which is the right thing. That was also a high stakes game. So there's no mystery here. The Hawks were not the better team in that game, and they got to play better. And if you're the Hawks, you would go into this game saying, look, we just lost this team. We have to be better. That's a little bit of an easy selling point if you're a coaching staff to the players, right? Whereas Orlando, they won the game, and obviously there's motivation for everybody in this game anyway. But I look forward to seeing how they adjust to it. But certainly, if all things go the same way, Orlando has the advantage.
Yeah, and look, there's, like you mentioned, we've kind of hinted at the size, and I think we'll get to kind of X factors in this game as we start to look forward to Tuesday's game rather than back to last Tuesday's game. Yeah. There's definitely size advantages, but I was really impressed with the way in that game, the way Atlanta was able to kind of find pockets to really attack them. Obviously, and we'll get to X factors and players who can turn the game, but a big factor in that game that I know you mentioned on your pod, I don't think I mentioned enough on my pod. Zachary Rissochet was in foul trouble very early in that game. Quinn Snyder fouled him out of the game, essentially, which is something the Magic did very, very well back in the 2010 playoff series. I like referencing that because when you can get Al Horford out of the game with two quick fouls like they did, it changes your game. I'm curious, do you feel like the Hawks will treat this more like that do or die and say, look, we got to trust even a rookie. We got to trust a rookie who Rissochet gives them a little bit of size. He's not, fully that big, obviously, but he gives them more size. The joke that I've been making with a lot of people is Dyson Daniels is an all defensive team player, fantastic defender. I thought he defended Franz Wagner pretty well. He's still too small to ride that ride. Franz is still going to find advantages even against a really good defender like Dyson Daniels. Getting some size on the floor against Franz or Paolo, because Paolo is probably going to be guarded by a Okongwu again. That was one of the big adjustments in that game. That's going to be essential for Atlanta to really fight back in this game if Orlando is aggressive, and especially if they're making shots.
Yeah, I think in general the Hawks just deferred too small in that game the entire time, which is a Quinn Snyder thing that he does, honestly. So it might happen again. I'm prepared for it. If it happens again, I'll be frustrated by it, I'm sure. And this is not even a Quinn Snyder thing. It's I believe 90% of head coaches are too conservative on foul trouble issues, especially for low foul players. My rant on that show was Ricochet is a 2 foul per game player. He shouldn't be getting fouled out of a game in the first half. He ends up playing, I think it was 16 minutes. And I'm not telling you that he's this end all be all. He's a really good prospect and already a pretty good player, but he would help them with length. And even Mo Gay, who is a flawed player, but they need Mo Gay's defense in this matchup. And Mo Gay was fouled out in this game as well. He had 4 fouls in 18 minutes, and they were conservative with him as well. So that doesn't fix everything, but I do think that having more length around, especially if they plan to, as you already alluded to, if they plan to have Okongwu be the primary on Paolo, which makes sense to me, given they don't have anybody else to do it, honestly, you need some secondary rim protection as well, and just length behind the play, because the theory of doing that makes a ton of sense until you realize there's no one behind Okongwu to be the help defender. And if Gay's not going to do that, they don't really have the second guy to do that. So that's kind of why I led with it earlier. It's really hard to deal with these two big forwards. Dyson can at least handle Franz reasonably.
Yeah, they'll play to a little bit of a stalemate. It won't be your typical Dyson Daniels game. And Franz is a quality player, a good defender against an all-star level player. They're not going to win. You're hoping to just break even.
Of course. And also, it's not Dyson's best. I mean, Dyson, for as physical and big as he actually is, he's not his best. It would be guarding a 6'8" forward. He's probably better against guards than he is someone like Franz. So long story short, they don't have perfect personnel. So keeping guys that actually have length on the floor, Ricochet and Mo Gay, isn't perfect, but they could definitely use that extra size in this matchup.
I mean, if these teams were perfect, they wouldn't be in the 7-8 play-in game. They'd be preparing for a playoff series next weekend, and that's part of the fun of these games. We've talked plenty about last Tuesday's game. Let's talk about what we expect to be the X factors, or the key factor in turning the upcoming game in the play-in game, the game that actually matters. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at Hungryroot. Spring is here. The pollen certainly says so. And life is busier than ever. Between work, family, and everything in between, who has time for grocery shopping and meal prep? I know I certainly don't with all the traveling that I've been doing lately and the traveling that I'm sure Brad and I will be preparing for, hopefully both of us this weekend. That's why I use Hungryroot. It makes eating healthy, delicious meals simple and stress-free. Hungryroot is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped into one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. I love how Hungryroot tailors my orders based on what I like or don't like, and it gets smarter every time. With their high-quality, nutritious food, you can stick to your gut-friendly, high-protein diet without spending hours planning. The meals come together in 15 minutes or less, giving you more time for whatever you want to do in life. Take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box, plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for 40% off and a lifetime free item. So the Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks, obviously very, very familiar with each other. And when we're looking at this game, we can already kind of see the contours or like the battle lines or what's going to determine a lot of this game. We talked a little bit about it in last week's episode, but I want to start with, I think, what is the biggest X factor in this game, or the biggest kind of changing factor in this game. And you mentioned it, I think, right off the top last week. We think it's pace, and it's not necessarily possession counts. It's not necessarily like who's playing fast break up and down. To me, it's more about who controls the pace. And I thought throughout the game last Tuesday that the moments the Magic were really successful is when they turned their defense into a half-court defense and enabled them to get out and run a little bit and kind of like pound the Hawks in the paint a little bit. Atlanta was really successful when they controlled the pace, especially Trae Young in that second quarter when he was kind of breaking through the pick and roll defense, getting to the paint, hitting those flip shots, getting those and ones. So he had a bunch of those and ones in that second quarter when Atlanta started to pull away and take a little bit of a lead. Obviously, Trae Young is a monster unto himself. How important is his ability to control the pace and get the Hawks kind of comfortable to this game?
I think it's huge, to your point. I mean, getting Trae loose, and this is a Hawks team that, in general, even beyond the matchup, really likes to push pace and thrives when they're able to push the pace. And that was a 97% possession game the other night, and that's really slow. That's a really slow pace game in the NBA. And that was the takeaway that I had from that night too, is that Orlando set the pace overall in the game. There were times, to your point, that the Hawks were the ones dictating that, and they were playing better as a result. But more often than not, it was Orlando slowing things down. They're more comfortable in that area. And I thought it was interesting, actually, the next game after that, and you would have never heard this because it was on the Hawks broadcast, but Larry Nance Jr. is hurt right now, was guesting on the TV broadcast with the Hawks TV guys during the next game. And he kind of, in pretty candid fashion, mentioned that was a huge talking point for the team behind closed doors after the Orlando game, is that they had to go back to playing their tempo. And I thought that was refreshing to hear because I saw the same thing. But, Quinn Snyder is not going to tell you a whole lot about what they're going to do. He's very guarded. He's just not going to share a lot. So I was like, oh, and Larry Nance is not guarded, which is I love about Larry Nance. But anyway, I was like, okay, that backs up what I saw as well. And I think in this matchup, they're going to have to try to push the pace. It's not always about possession count. I said that number on purpose because that kind of just dictates it. But the Hawks are more comfortable playing fast than Orlando is. And if whichever team sets the tempo, it's like, the Hawks can still win a slow-paced game. Orlando can win a fast-paced game. It's not going to definitely decide the matchup. But I can tell you one thing. The Hawks would prefer to play fast. And Orlando probably wouldn't in this matchup. So whoever has that advantage has a leg up for sure.
Yeah, I always say, I remember Jamal Mosley said this a few years ago when someone asked him about Luka Doncic, because everyone asked Jamal Mosley about Luka Doncic, who is kind of Doncic's guy in Dallas. And Jamal Mosley said in response to this question, your best player kind of dictates your pace. And Trae Young is obviously like, get the ball in his hands, let him create some havoc, get the defense kind of flattened out, get out in transition, hit those, push ahead threes, those trailing threes. The best way to beat a good defense is to not have to face them or face them when they're trying to communicate and figure out where they're going. And I think, again, it's not so much pace, because I know Quinn Snyder kind of hates when you cite the possession count as pace. Like he was like that in Utah too. It wasn't just an Atlanta thing. And he kind of like turned me on to like understanding pace is not how the stats call pace. It's about the tempo you run your offense. It's about just kind of how you control the game. The Magic don't necessarily want to be slowed to a crawl. Their offense gets stuck when they don't run fast, when they don't execute quickly, if that makes sense. When they're bringing the ball up and Paolo has to organize and no one's initiating sets until there's 15, 14 seconds left on the shot clock, the Magic are in deep trouble. Like that's when their offense slows to a crawl, which it can. That's when they're in deep trouble. And so the Magic always have to find ways to pick up their tempo and pick up the way that they're playing. But to your point, they don't want to play too fast. They don't have the firepower. They don't have the shooting. Their defense is better when they can set everybody up, get everybody kind of loaded up where they want them loaded up, and dictate how you're gonna play your tempo and how you're gonna play your pace. And so I think that, I remember you mentioning that in the episode last week. And I was definitely very focused on the tempo that game was played last week. And obviously, like, there's that moment in the second quarter I mentioned where it felt like Atlanta was starting to take control, and then Orlando grabbed control back. They dictated when they ran. They got back pretty well against Atlanta for the most part. There's, I think, definitely some moments where the Hawks got free in transition, even off of made baskets. Orlando was maybe a little late getting back. That's going to be, I think, a huge deciding factor in the game. What else are you looking for? What else are you thinking about as an X factor in this game?
It's kind of related to that, which is why I'll do it now. I tend to push back on people just using fast break points as transition, because it's not exactly a good thing.
Yeah,
an indicator. It's not always perfect. But the Hawks had 5 fast break points in the game on Tuesday, and that's not enough for what the Hawks want to play. And I use that now to say, this is part of this too. Whichever team wins the turnover battle is probably going to have a leg up in this matchup, which I know is obvious, but both teams are not great taking care of the ball, and both teams are great at forcing turnovers. So they both really feed their offenses with turnover creation defensively. They're able to push pace, all those things. And that's a way to get stops on both sides. And in the first matchup, unsurprisingly, given the way it went, Orlando had, I think it was 14 turnovers, and the Hawks had 18 turnovers. That's only 4. It's only, quote unquote, only 4, but that's 4 possessions. And that's not a small thing when both teams, again, rely on that to some degree as far as defensively. And Quinn Snyder always makes this point about your defense, like, and sort of feeding your offense, but not taking the ball out of the net really is a big factor in your offense being much better. But the easiest, best way to do that is to turn the ball over, because a lot of those live ball ones will lead to easy buckets moving and transition and all those things. So because the profiles are so similar in teams that do have some ball security issues and also have ball hawks on defense, whichever team, if it's neutral, it's neutral. That's kind of fine on both sides, I would imagine. But if one team loses that battle and one team wins it, it will surprise me if that team does not win the game. Yeah,
and I think to that point, like, you know, I don't know what the last time I looked at the FanDuel spread, it was 5.5 points. This is gonna be, or this set, you know, the two take out the game on Sunday because it doesn't count. The Hawks won the first game by 4 points. The Hawks won the first game by 6 points. The Magic won the second game by 6 points. The Magic won the third game by 7 points. This is going to be a tight game. To me, it feels. I know I said the Magic probably should have won last week's game by more, but this is a game where both teams have very, very clear flaws. And like last week's game, it feels like the team that can overcome those flaws. So whether it's turnovers, whether it's, you know, the Magic's 3-point shooting, whether it's the Hawks getting out in transition and trying to find those extra possessions. You know, Jamal Mosley talks a lot about the possession game. And for a low possession team like the Magic that struggles to score, losing that possession battle, giving up extra offensive rebounds, that was something the Magic were really disappointed in that game Tuesday. They were happy to get the win, but Jamal Mosley mentioned it specifically after the game. We got to do a better job on the offensive glass, and we got to make our free throws. Like, we left the door open for this loss. We were still able to walk through, get the win, but we left the door open. And Jamal Mosley, I think he even had said after Sunday's game, that in a game that feels this tight, it's going to be the margins. It's going to be which team gets the details better, which team gets the better details, which team gets that last loose ball. There's some near fighting in that game last Tuesday. It was rough and tumble, and there's gonna be some talking. He's got Paolo likes to talk, Trae Young likes to talk, Trae likes to talk. It's gonna be an intense game, and so I'm expecting it to be decided by little things. Now, obviously we all expect. And we're 20 minutes into this thing, and we've talked a little bit about Trae and a little bit about Paolo and a little bit about Franz. It's still going to, you have to expect your stars to play big. We know Trae shows up in big games. Paolo doesn't have a long record on playoff level games, but he showed up, averaged 27 points per game in the playoffs last year. This is a big game, and you expect those guys to show up. So the question that I want to kind of close the show with then is, which players or what could turn the game? Which players could flip this game in one favor or the other? The others, as Shaq likes to say. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you, or today's episode of Locked On Magic and Locked On Hawks. I think I said Locked On Magic in the first one. I'm so used to doing that. That's my ad reads. But today's episode is sponsored by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about it. When was the last time you had a service emergency? If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications all through an app on your phone or computer. I love that I don't need to carry 2 phones. With Open Phone, you can manage business calls and texts from one app, whether you're at your desk or on the go. And their shared inbox allows your team to jump into any conversation without missing a beat. And AI call transcripts and summaries save you time on follow-ups and ensures you never lose track of customer interaction. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's Open Phone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you're switching from another service, Open Phone will even port your existing numbers over at no extra charge. Again, that's openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. This is again Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, with Brad Rowland, the host of Locked On Hawks, as the Orlando Magic and the Atlanta Hawks prepare to do battle for the 7th seed in the NBA in the Eastern Conference playoffs against the Boston Celtics. We'll both shake our fists angrily at John Corrales, regardless of who wins. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Again, like I said before, we know what Trae Young's going to do. We know what Paolo Banchero is going to do. We probably know what Franz Wagner is going to do. Who to you could turn this game in one direction or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the stars are at the top of the list, and I think the stat that I pulled earlier, Paolo and Franz are averaging 61 points a game combined in the 3 games so far against the Hawks. That's probably more than the Hawks want to allow. Like, obviously, they're going to get something. Everyone knows this. Like, you're not going to hold those guys down, nor are they probably going to hold Trae to 5 points, something like that. But 61 is more than the Hawks want to let those guys score. So that's important. But beyond the star level, we alluded to it a little bit earlier about just some guys that can stay on the floor for the Hawks, size-wise, Ricochet and Mo Gay. I think Mo Gay is not someone the Magic fans probably know a ton about. He's been playing a lot more for the Hawks recently, 6'11", young guy.
He hit those 3 threes against them in the first matchup that Atlanta won. That's
right.
Paolo,
and that's when he was playing a lot less.
Yeah, and they'll hide Paolo on him. They're gonna try to hide in quotation marks. They'll hide Paolo,
and they should. That's what they should do. And Mo Gay is, I like Mo quite a bit. He's a pretty below average to be kind of offensive player at this point. He is out there for his defense. He's been rebounding the ball a heck of a lot recently. And if the Hawks are going to be able to defend the Magic around the rim, he is a pathway to do that. So I am circling him on the Hawks side as an underrated potential factor in that. Can he play enough minutes? Can he keep him on the floor offensively? Because if he's able to play more minutes, that means he's not killing their offense. And their best path defensively in this matchup is to be able to play Gay and Okongwu together, to actually have some real size in the front court. Also, they've been playing Gay as the backup center in recent days. And I don't know about you, I'm expecting the stars to play a lot of minutes in this game. It's not a back-to-back. They didn't play on Sunday. They won't play again until Friday. I'm thinking minutes cost to begin with a 4 for a lot of guys in this matchup. Trae, Dyson, and Paolo and Franz. If they probably, I would say a lot of minutes for the big guns.
Yeah, so. I would expect all those key players to play upwards of 38, 39 minutes, like flirting with 40, depending on how the game's going. Like if one team's up 10, 11, like midway through the first, like early in the game, like I could see that, Jamal Mosley trying to get Paolo a quick blow or get Franz. Like the one thing Jamal Mosley cannot do, and he's been better about this recently, is take both of them out at the same time. Paolo and Franz have to be on the floor at the same time. Or not at the same time, or one of them on the floor at all times.
If they don't, I would say if you're the Hawks and you see a lineup that has neither Paolo or Franz, you're throwing a party on the sidelines, even if it's for 2 minutes. Like you would love to see that. And the Hawks never do. The Hawks don't have a second star like that, but the Hawks it's never going to be Trae without Dyson, et cetera. That's the closest they can come. The Hawks don't have that second guy, but I think Okongwu is going to play 40 minutes. I think he got to 40 for the first time in his career in that first matchup against Orlando.
Yeah,
he's going to play a lot. So keeping him out of foul trouble is another small thing that I will throw out there on the Hawks side. Is like if Okongwu can't play 40 minutes in this game because of fouls or something else, that's trouble.
And if Okongwu is guarding Paolo Banchero, like look, Paolo Banchero he's not a free throw merchant in the way that like a James Harden or some of those guys who people criticize for drawing fouls. Paolo Banchero is, I'm going to stick my shoulder in you, and I'm so big you've got to foul me. You have no choice because I'm bigger and stronger than a lot of you guys. It's going to be fascinating because I think one of the reasons Okongwu got in foul trouble is he was the primary defender on Paolo Banchero, and I think that's probably, like you said, that's probably the right move for Atlanta, all things considered, with the matchups they have. And so on the Orlando side, I think one of the big turning points, or one of the big things that turned last week's game, is Wendell Carter had a really strong game. Like I'm going to pull up my stat sheet here. He had 17 points and 9 rebounds, including 5 offensive rebounds. He had 6 steals and 3 blocks as well.
6 steals for Wendell Carter Jr.?
6 steals for Wendell Carter Jr. He had 9 stocks. It was like crazy. Probably the best game he's played all year, to be perfectly honest, because Wendell's had a really, really rough season. But because Okongwu was on him, and I think they had Mo Gay on Carter, or if Okongwu was out there and Gay had to be out for the backup center, you're losing a lot of size, and that allowed the Magic to really attack the offensive glass. The biggest thing for me that I'm concerned with is, Trae Young is going to kind of get his, even if you defend him well. And I think the Magic generally have defended Trae Young pretty well in the three games that they played against him, forcing a few turnovers, like kind of picking their spots of when they want him to score, when they want him to get others involved. They kind of like pick how Trae wants to play. And that's, I think, going to be a key thing in this too, is how they throw different defenses at him. And Wendell Carter's a big part of that, because he'll blitz Trae. They'll put just a lot of size. They'll put Franz on him. They'll put a lot of size on Trae Young and just make him work for everything. But Atlanta has just a lot of guys that can get hot. Karis LeVert can hit threes. Terrence Mann can get himself going. Niang can hit threes. Zachary Risachet can hit threes. He's had some really big scoring games, and he's made such a big push at the end of his rookie season. It's been really nice to see, as just from a cheering for players to develop type deal. The Magic, they have Paolo and Franz, and that they can count on them. They don't know who else they're going to count on. Like the Magic.
Well, I was actually going to ask you this. Because it's my last point I was going to make at some point. So goes right in the last matchup a week ago. The non-Paolo, non-Franz, I'll call it the supporting cast.
Yeah, call that.
Shot 10 of 22 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens again, the Hawks are in trouble, I would say. Now, that doesn't usually happen, as I know you chronicle all the time. That does not usually happen.
Yes.
But if that happens, the Hawks are probably in trouble. So, like, what did you make of that? As far as, like, a lot of them are open looks. That's going to happen. But I circled that too. Like, this is a big game. At home, there's always the theory that supporting guys play better at home, shoot better at home, etc. Games are Orlando, but man, I know from talking to Hawks fans, if they see that again, if they see all these guys that don't make shots all year long, make shots against them, they're gonna pull their hair out.
So I would warn your Hawks fans about this, and put them on a little bit of alert. Over the last 18 games, so the Magic went 12-6 their last 18 games. So that includes the last 2 games. Magic shot pretty well from 3 in the Atlanta and Indiana game, so doesn't mess up the stats too much. The Magic are shooting 35% from three over their last 18 games. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is back up to, he was shooting like 31, 32% for most of the season. Over the last month, he's up to 34, nearly 35% from three. He's shooting almost 45% from three in his last 18 games. And like, this is the kind of game you brought Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in to score and be a factor in. Anthony Black is going through a nice little shooting spurt. He can be wildly inconsistent, but the Magic play well when he makes 2 threes. Gary Harris has suddenly decided to start making threes again. So, yes, you look at the big picture stats and you look at kind of the full season stats, and the Magic were the worst 3-point shooting team in the league at 31%. There's no hiding from that. The Magic always feel like there's a dud around the corner. Like they could just have that random 5 for 35 game. And that's just kind of who they are. And that's kind of what they do. But pretty consistently over the last month and a half, they're making threes. I would agree with you that game last Tuesday was more unusual for them, was a little bit on the higher end, but they've been doing that more and more lately. And so it wasn't so surprising. It was good to see them do, like, from the Magic perspective, it was good to see them do it in such a big spot. Cause again, like, especially against better defenses. So we saw this against like Dallas and against the Clippers a few weeks ago. The Magic just couldn't hit shots. It didn't matter if they were open. Didn't matter. It can become a little endemic when they miss a couple open threes in a row. I know we talked about this last week. Atlanta's defense has really been struggling. They're giving up a lot of open threes. Orlando's probably going to make open threes if you give them up. That was not the case 2 months ago. It was a coin flip if they're going to make those open threes. Now they're going to make them if you leave them open. If and there's some trust built in now.
Yeah, it's a huge factor. I mean, obviously you don't want to give up that many open ones, but I think I said this earlier. I'll say it again. Like, the Hawks have to know that they're not in a good position if they don't outshoot the Magic, or at least be even. But preferably, that's the one area where they have a real clear advantage is with their shot making. Not necessarily inside the arc, but especially outside the arc, and more of their. You mentioned before they have a bunch of guys that can make shots. They don't have a ton of like dead-eye shooters on this roster. Niang is probably the best case of that. Trae's still a good shooter, Ricochet, but they do have just general depth and guys can get hot. I think Laverne will be a big X factor as well. Not like a guy that I wanted to lead with, but a guy that was really good at the last week of the season and will play a lot of minutes in this game. I think the Hawks are going to play Karis LeVert 30+ minutes off the bench if I had to guess. Yeah. So you'll see a lot of him.
Yeah. Just like let's close out the kind of preview part. One of the ideas that I had when we got into this is who's the player that besides the stars. And like, look, I think we could both agree a lot of the Hawks kind of offense and like the thing that I would fear the most is Trae Young getting hot. I think the Magic just generally in the 3 games have done a good job preventing Trae from like finding a rhythm from 3 so that he doesn't go on these kind of big 3-point scoring runs. They kind of limit him to step backs and kind of low percentage shots. And if he makes them, he makes them. It's Trae Young. He's going to make some of those. But I think like a big factor is the Magic keeping Trae out of rhythm, like I mentioned. Like Franz Wagner's going to get the primary defense on Trae Young. Like they're going to put a 6'10" guy on Trae Young, put a lot of size on him. If he tries running screen and rolls, Wendell Carter is going to blitz. It wouldn't shock me if, Jonathan Isaac's probably going to be the backup center. They're going to be very comfortable blitzing or switching Jonathan Isaac onto Trae Young and just kind of trying to keep him out of the paint and force him to either force shots or get downhill against bigger players where he's going to have to work a little harder to get those floaters. Again, like that second quarter last week, he got a little loose in that second quarter, and that's when Atlanta, I think, really found a rhythm. The guy that I'm most afraid of as the Magic is Zachary Ricochet because he has the size. We've seen him capable of having big 3-point shooting games. And Orlando they're good at limiting 3-point attempts. They're going to fly around and challenge a lot of those shots and try and chase guys off the line. But they'll give up threes to concentrate on keeping Trae Young out of the paint. And so a guy like Ricochet who can hit 5-6 threes and be a factor on defense, I don't want to say like getting him out of the game is paramount, but he's someone that I think we haven't seen play well in these games, who, if he plays well, if he has a big scoring game, that could be the deciding factor. Like him having a big game could be the deciding factor. Who on the Magic, besides the stars, because the stars are the stars, who on the Magic are you most concerned about going or having a big game to turn this thing?
Yeah, I'm struggling with this a little bit. I think it's probably KCP as a shot maker, because I think you mentioned it before, but he's done this before. He's not going to be afraid of a playoff level setting. He's been better recently, and he's the shooter that I think I trust the most of their supporting guys. So would it surprise anybody if he hit 5-6 threes in this game? I don't think it would. I'd be a little bit worried about that. So yeah, that's probably my choice. The other one would be maybe Wendell Carter, but I would lean to probably KCP as the guy I'm most afraid of if I have, and I'm not terrified of him by any means if I'm the Hawks. I think it is a lot of Paolo and Franz, and you know that as well as anybody. Like, it's a lot of Paolo and Franz. But if there is a third guy who makes shots in this game, it starts to add up a little bit if you're the Hawks, and probably going to be playing slower than you want to against an elite defense, all those things. Like, the margins get kind of slim if KCP makes shots.
Yeah, it will be an interesting game. The Magic and the Hawks tip off at the Kia Center at 7:30, TNT exclusive. So no local broadcast. Boo.
Yeah.
But it should be a fantastic game. These teams have played some great games throughout the course of the season, and I'm tired of talking to you, Brad. So we're gonna close out there. We'll see each other in the Eastern Conference Finals at least.
Yeah, we'll meet you again in a few weeks, right? I'm sure what are the odds on that at FanDuel? We should look.
I don't know. We should look.
It's probably pretty lofty, I would imagine. But hey,
pretty lofty.
Maybe it'll happen.
I'm all about making Danny and John sweat. So let's whatever we can do to make Danny Cunningham of Locked On Cavs and John Kraulis of Locked On Celtics sweat a little bit. I think we're good with that. Brad, it has been great chatting with you today. It's been great chatting with you over the last few weeks as these teams battled for the Southeast Division and the 7 seed, and we'll see who comes out on top on Tuesday.